March 2004, Namco would release a one-of-a-kind title onto the shelves of North American gaming stores for the youth to consume. An original Xbox exclusive. Back when Xbox had exclusive. Breakdown. What kind of game is this? And if it were to be revived in today's gaming generation, without loot boxes and crap, what would be expected of it? Come with me as we'll be able to answer these questions and more on today's episode of Topic of Discussion, featuring Breakdown.
This can't be real!
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 3 of Topic of Discussion. Today we're talking about Breakdown, an old game that came out all the way back in 2004. The olden days, back when games were actually worth a damn. Miss those days. Anyway, current disdain for modern day gaming set aside for right now, let's answer the big question. What is Breakdown? Breakdown is what will be considered a first-person action game, not a shooter. Although at first glance it may seem like a first-person shooter, there's a lot more to it than just shooting. It incorporates an in-depth combat system complete with punches, kicks, and even evasive maneuvers. It doesn't really come as a surprise since it was developed by Namco, the guys behind Tekken and Soul Calibur. Now that I've given you the short version of what Breakdown was back in its time, I got another question for you. If Breakdown was slated for release later this year, built from the ground up, completely remade, what would you or I expect from it? Well, that's what we're here to answer on today's episode of Topic of Discussion featuring Breakdown. As you know, here at Topic of Discussion, we have 3 main categories we need to address: design, content, and gameplay. So, how about we start with design? Looking back on Breakdown, it's pretty clear that this game could use a visual upgrade. And judging from Namco's current hard-on for Unreal Engine 4, I see no reason for it to not be used in the development of a new Breakdown game. Tekken 7 as its release looks visually stunning, and no doubt Soul Calibur 6 will look just as good when it comes out. From character models to stage environments, I can see a beautiful gritty world being realized in a reboot of Breakdown. Speaking of environment, how should that be handled? In the original game, level design was kind of boring and drab with hallways and office buildings. You would occasionally go outside, but there wasn't really much going on out there either. Looking back at games like Dying Light may be considered an open world approach, but Breakdown isn't an errand boy kind of game. The main focus was on the story, the characters, and the overall internal conflict. Not going out of your way to save some random NPCs or pick up and deliver items to other characters held up somewhere across the map. Well, what about Mirror's Edge? I'd imagine if I asked anybody who knew about Breakdown to think of a similar game, that more than likely Mirror's Edge would come up. But in my opinion, Mirror's Edge was way too focused on the movement and free-running aspect of the game. Yes, the environments were amazing, but there wasn't really much interaction outside of doors and objects you can jump over. The level design in Breakdown was more catered to both close quarters combat and long-range combat. The gunplay in Breakdown was a lot more pronounced, so you needed things like cover in order to defend yourself against long-range enemies. Being able to just run and jump everywhere wouldn't be enough for a game like that. Now, a good example in my opinion would be Titanfall. Not the Titan part obviously, but the boots to the ground combat part. Titanfall did a very good job in building an open level design for players to run, jump, and play around in. The campaign's level progression was very smooth, and when moving into new areas, it didn't feel too confined or on rails. I can definitely see a remake of Breakdown using a similar level design to have players navigate through. Since Breakdown is a pretty action-oriented game, I think good level design similar to that of Titanfall would pretty much benefit both the close quarters player and the long-range player, especially given the abilities that you get in that game. Now, how about that gameplay? As I said before, Breakdown is a first-person action game, not so much as a first-person shooting game. So there definitely has to be a strong emphasis on the player's ability to interact with enemies, objects, and events, both close up and far away during gameplay. One of the things that the original game struggled with, in my opinion, was clumsy movement or controls. Navigating through the world with Derek felt stiff, like you were running around with a surfboard taped to your back. Now, keep in mind this game is 14 years old, so those are mostly outdated mechanics. But now that it's 2018, there is no excuse for clunky controls in our first-person action games. Games like Dying Light, Titanfall, and Mirror's Edge feel much more fluid while in motion, and if Breakdown is going to make any type of comeback, I would expect nothing less. Now, I'm not saying Derek should be able to run up the side of the wall like Tony Jaa, but there should be a decent sweet spot. Nothing past basic backflips and rolling and maybe a little bit of wall running, but nothing past that. The original game did a pretty decent job of that from the start. And one thing that they could add is a mechanic from Dying Light, the ability to look over your shoulder while you're running. There's some parts in Breakdown where you gotta have to run. There's no way you're gonna be able to just fight everybody. Derek's not a Superman. So being able to run and look behind you while these guys are chasing you and putting their foot up your ass would probably be a nice mechanic to have. And in my opinion, the most attractive feature about the gameplay in Breakdown is the fighting. This alone is what makes Breakdown such an interesting and fun game to play. Being able to take on multiple enemies one-on-one with just your fist and, your feet, of course. And no, I'm not talking about some gimmicky VR, motion control, or quick time event bullshit. I'm talking about actual, precise, consistent hand-to-hand combat mechanics. Seeing as how Namco is slowly becoming the king of fighters, this should be a relatively easy task. With so many assets available from Tekken, producing a substantial move list for our protagonists to take advantage of would be phenomenal. Namco could also use this as an opportunity to introduce the casual market to fighting games from a perspective that they'll be able to easily handle. I may have a completely separate video about that alone because I think that's a good idea. Alright folks, last but certainly not least, game content. Now, most first-person shooter campaigns typically last anywhere between 8 to 12 hours, with multiplayer packaged on to round out that $60 price tag. Because Breakdown is different in that regard, I think a more reasonable time frame for the campaign should be anywhere between 15 and 20 hours. Definitely going to be spending a lot more time fighting people and upgrading your abilities rather than just going down corridors and laying waste to enemies everywhere you go. Additional game modes that can complement the main campaign can be time attack, score attack, survival mode, as well as online leaderboards for each. And as I said in my previous episode of Topic of Discussion, make sure that there is substantial unlockables to keep players invested throughout the years. Unlocking music, concept art, or even development diaries is a good thing. Achievements are quite stale in comparison to actual unlockables that can be found and earned in the game. If all of these ideas and concepts are considered for a reimagined, reworked Breakdown in 2018, I have no doubts in my mind that it will do relatively well in today's gaming market. Namco should really consider bringing this one out of the attic. But anyway folks, this was today's episode of Topic of Discussion featuring Breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you haven't heard of this game, go look it up. It's interesting to say the least. As always, I'm your Immortal Afro Josh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next upload. Have a good one.